Wolfpack in the house, welcome. It is 12 o'clock. It is 2/21/21. We see our participant number rising into the hundreds of Wolfpack students who have decided to spend time on their weekend thinking about their future, thinking about their career paths, where they want to be for their internships, for their careers when they graduate. We have all levels of students here today, from freshmen to seniors to graduate students, and we're so happy that you have spent some time with us today. Just to give you a little logistics on how our time is going to go today. I'm Marcy Bullock. I will be your Master of Ceremonies today. Grant is going to pop a link in the chat that you will be able to see, which tells you the agenda for our whole afternoon. So we're going to have an hour together in this first Zoom meeting, and then you're going to get to decide where you want to go from 1 to 2, and you're going to get to decide where you want to go from 2 to 3. You are welcome to pop in and out of the sessions. This is webinar style, friends, so you actually cannot unmute or turn on your camera, which I know doesn't make you sad. You can be relaxed in your PJs at home, but you can ask questions in the Q&A. So we have disabled the chat just because it gets a little crazy with chat and Q&A. We encourage you to ask questions live. As Grant just put in the chat, the agenda for today, if you go to that Zoom link, which takes you over to our page, it will show you all the optional sessions that we have after our recruiter panel, which is your first hour. And again, just so you understand, today, please interact with our panelists. Please write down their names. Please connect to them on LinkedIn. That is why you're here today, is to network and make these amazing connections. For the first hour, we have some people behind the scenes. Sari, Courtney, Lori, and Grant, they have turned off their cameras, but they will be helping you out with maybe some behind the scenes questions, and they may even be interrupting to ask some live questions and turning their camera on when they see a really great question. We also had a lot of people ask questions beforehand. So we had a Padlet, and based on the questions you asked ahead of time, I've got the list here, but I am happy to go off script with all of the several hundred of you that are here today to allow you to get whatever questions you're interested in answered. Now, just another thing to remember is that we will have giveaways today. So we are giving away Apple AirPod Pros, woo woo, and hopefully you will be the lucky winner, and you can pop those earbuds in and walk around and listen to our podcast, Wolfpack Career Chats, shameless plug. Sari's gonna pop that in the chat if you have not subscribed yet. And that will be happening after today's CareerCON webinar. So you'll get a message if you won. So definitely stay as long as you can, because we can look at the analytics and see who was really involved in the webinar today. In addition, we have bookstore gift cards. So that could help you pay for your books next semester. So lots of great giveaways happening based on all of you that have come today. Also want to mention to you today that we are going to record this. So if, again, you want to go on a walk, it's a sunny day in Raleigh. I don't know how many of you are right here on campus, but just again, listen to this while you're walking your pet, and you can come back and listen to the recording later on. I will be your co-host. I'll be popping in and out of the breakouts. The second breakouts that we have going from, and again, look at that agenda that Grant put in. He'll pop that in a couple times throughout our presentation. There will be internship bridge and job bridge coming up 1 to 2. So that is the session I would recommend to all of you to attend if you do not know your top 5 Gallup strengths. If you know your top 5 Gallup strengths, you have a choice of going to one of the breakout sessions on Gallup strengths. Those are all listed on that website. There's a session on service, on women in the workforce, on advocating for yourself, for career readiness, on getting the job based on your top 5 strengths. So you get a choice of where you want to go from 1 to 2, and then you'll exit that Zoom webinar and enter the one that goes from 2 to 3, which is very career focused. We have humanities, creative, business. we have engineering, we have STEM, we have something for every single major. But today's panel, I'm really excited about because these are the hiring managers. So to kick us off today for CareerCON, each one of my favorite talent acquisition managers from an amazing company that does a lot of hiring of college graduates is here to answer your questions about what they see when they are interacting with talent from universities around the entire nation. They don't just recruit at NC State, they recruit all over the country for internships and entry-level students transition from college to career. So my plan is to kick off with some introductions of the panelists. I'm going to call on each one of them, and I'm going to ask them to tell our class today, we've got 300 of you here, a little bit about themselves, their company, and of course, a fun fact. So to kick us off, Sarah Krepp.
Good afternoon, students. Sarah Krepp. I am Vice President of Human Resources with Astari Oncology. We're a small biotech company out in the park. And you may have heard of us. We've been on 60 Minutes a couple of times. Our organization utilizes the polio vaccine, and we inject that into tumors so that the tumors light up, your body sees them, and then there's an attack of those tumors just through your natural immunoresponse system. So that's what we do in a nutshell. Fun fact for me is that I have found out during COVID that I love deep sea fishing. So I've been able to take my mask off and get out on the ocean a little bit and catch some pretty big fish over the last few months.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up is Catherine Cassidy.
Hey everyone, I'm Catherine Cassidy. I am a campus manager on our university relations team with Eaton Corporation. So we are a $22 billion power management company. We have an industrial sector and an electrical sector. You name it. If it generates power and you can make it work, probably Eaton is behind it. So we work with NC State a lot because a lot of our facilities, we have about 9 located in North Carolina. So it's one of the largest concentrated areas for Eaton. And fun fact about me, I was on the show Let's Make a Deal with Wayne Brady, and I won a trip to Vancouver, Canada. Very fancy, very fancy.
Thank you, Catherine. Deep sea fishing and TV stars. Darlene Godsey, how are you going to follow that act?
I feel extremely boring. I'll come up with something. So Darlene Mcatee, I am currently the Director of Business Operations for Q Squared Solutions, which is headquartered in the Triangle as well. We are a joint venture between IQVIA, which probably most of you know from the giant building sitting off of 540 and 40, as well as our other parent company is Quest Diagnostics. So what we do is the lab processing for patients who are going through clinical trials and in the drug development process to make sure that the drug is safe and effective. Interesting fact, kind of along the way through COVID, we've also been supporting some of the community testing as our parent company, Quest Diagnostics, for example, has been overloaded with trying to get patient samples conducted. So, you know, as clinical trials may have taken a pause and everyone stopped going to the doctor momentarily back in spring of 2020, we jumped in to try to help with that effort. And now we're more involved, I would say, on the side of developing vaccinations. So interesting journey for us over the last year, away from what we were used to seeing. A fun fact about me, I have nothing to compete with being on a TV show or anything else. But I guess I'll just say, as it might relate to questions students may have, or how I may help students maybe going forward from a networking perspective, I started my career getting a finance degree. I ended up in HR because that was the role that was available. I worked in HR for well over a decade, and I am no longer in HR anymore. So I'm actually working more in a chief of staff role for our CEO, and still touching some of the workforce dynamics. But I think from a career transition perspective, this has been pretty exciting. I think you know, some people feel like they can't make that change. And so it's been an interesting journey for me.
That's exciting, Darlene. And you've been in HR at so many companies that I know you're going to have wonderful answers today that students will have to their questions. All right, so our first 3 were really more STEM engineering focused companies. Our next 3 are going to be branching out into other areas, business and humanities. Jenny Hoffler.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Jenny Hoffler. I'm the Director for University Recruiting at Metlife. You may be familiar with our 3 large buildings by Lake Crabtree and Cary. We're a 152-year-old firm. Employee benefits is typically how you might know us. So if you went to the dentist and through your parents' dental insurance, it might have been Metlife. So I am so happy to be here. We hire over 100 interns per year, as well as entry-level students into our programs. Um, I'm very focused on the technology side of hiring, as well as investment roles, actuarial positions, even supply chain, global procurement. So a wide variety of opportunities. I'm born and raised in Cary. My fun fact is that I lived across the street from Marcy Bullock, so I feel like I was right by a celebrity growing up. My brother and my dad both graduated from NC State, so we do have a Wolfpack in our house as well. Thank you so much for.
I love your fun fact. I've known Jenny since she was 11. Next up is Laura Mcatee.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Laura. I graduated from NC State back in 2017, although it feels like yesterday sometimes. I am currently the Talent Acquisition and Diversity and Inclusion Specialist, very long title, at Workplace Options. I met Jenny, you might be familiar with us. We're kind of as well in the employee assistance program space, so employee benefits. We do anything from physical health to day-to-day support like child or elder care to mental health. So we provide support telephonically to over about 100,000 companies around the world, so very international. And we do hire a lot of entry students, especially from NC State, because I'm a little biased towards NC State grads. Marcy actually hired someone from your class, I think 2 years ago after I spoke there. And my fun fact, I got engaged back in August. My ring on here. So very excited about that. And it was my birthday yesterday. So good things happening over here.
Happy birthday, Laura, and congratulations. And Laura's an alum from my class as well. So it's always fun to have students that have taken my class come back as wonderful superstar successes. Next up is Bob Miles.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bob Miles. I am a talent acquisition manager at RTI International. And it's hard to sum up what RTI does in a brief intro. People ask, and I always ask how much time they have. But in a nutshell, we do government contracted research primarily in social science, laboratory science, international development, and pharmaceutical consulting. So we're always hiring in the STEM fields and other fields as well. Fun fact, I'm jealous that I haven't been deep sea fishing. But fun fact would be I actually started training for a race this morning that I'm doing in May in Bryce Canyon. 36 miles, so I spent a very cold morning in Umstead, and my legs hurt. That's my fun fact for this morning.
That's exciting, Bob. Good luck in that 30. You're going to run all 36 miles yourself?
I'll probably walk a little bit.
That's amazing. I can't wait to follow your journey. So proud of all of our panelists today. Did I hit all of you? Your faces moved. Okay, I think so. All right, so students, do not hesitate in the Q&A. Light it up. Anything goes with a question today. We would like to make this as organic and interactive as possible. And so do not hesitate to type in anything on your mind. If it's on your mind, it's probably on 316 other people's minds today. So I'm going to kick off with our first question to Bob. Do experiences such as projects and internships put you in a better spot to be hired, even if your GPA is less than the minimum required?
Absolutely. I'm not sure about other companies, but we don't ask GPA anymore. We're not allowed to put it on our job descriptions. We just felt that it wasn't indicative of future success, but we do look at internships. We look at projects. When you're coming out entry level, anything you've done during your college career counts toward, the role you're probably applying to. So I go projects first, and, don't worry about, well, I wouldn't say don't worry about your GPA, but don't stress over it.
That's an interesting perspective, Bob. And, one thing I heard recently, you said you can't ask the GPA. And I definitely want our other panelists to chime in because I think some of you do screen on GPA. And I always tell students, like, no one will ask you your GPA 5 years out of college, but some will ask you originally. And recently, one of my alums applied for a job and she was not even allowed to say the name of her university because, like Laura knows, with the diversity, equity, and inclusion, they don't want to be like, oh, we're giving preference to this Ivy League student. So a lot of things are changing. Any other panelists, please unmute if you would like to add something about the GPA.
I can. We do require GPA, so we like to see that up front. We have lowered it, to be honest, with all the research that we've been looking at. So I'm not sure if it's something like Bob was saying where we might be going away from it. We're still looking into that, but we do require 2.8.
And Jenny, you were going to add 2 for MetLife.
Yes, very similar to Catherine in that we're definitely reevaluating. Ours is program by program. So actuarials might be 3.2, whereas sales trainee program didn't require GPA. So we're trying to become more consistent across the firm and really look at the person more holistically, because it seems really tough when someone's working a full-time job and they're trying to be involved in some activities on campus and they're trying to get good grades. You don't want to necessarily hold a GPA against them, which is almost what it feels like when someone's being screened based on their GPA. So we're definitely trying to take into account and consideration so many different dynamics that a person has to their leadership, all of these other really tangible, important aspects. I think the GPA is becoming a data point, but maybe less and less of a most valued one, whereas it used to be that was one of the first things that you looked at. So I definitely feel like that dynamic is shifting.
Yeah, and I wanted to really quickly comment on that too. I think it depends on industry as well, because in my job, doing health and wellness, like some positions, I could see my hiring directors looking at that, but honestly, I've never looked twice at a GPA. But I think some like engineering places or technology or maybe finance, like they might look a little bit more at that. So I think maybe just looking into your particular industry and seeing if that's something that they consider, reaching out to your network. And like Catherine, she can tell you that they do look at GPA versus me. I would say, don't worry about it. So I think it just depends on what you're targeting as well.
Yeah, and
Go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say, I would also add, even if it's not asked for, if you have a really good GPA, put it on there, right? Brag about it. Just because they don't ask, don't leave it off.
Yeah, and Sarah, I'll throw this follow-up to this piece to you too, because there is so much more to a candidate than just how they performed with a class grade. And obviously we don't want to communicate to students your GPA doesn't matter, but we're in a global pandemic. We understand not everybody learns well distance ed. So what if a student was doing really well, then in 2020, they had to share their internet with a sibling, move home back to their high school bedroom? I mean, what do you think about the grades at that point, and should they address that in the interview?
Yeah, I think if it comes up in the interview, certainly being prepared for that question is prudent. But I think 2020, into 2021 right now is going to be a year of grace for everyone. So we've all lived through it. We all understand that it was a trying, tumultuous time. So certainly if someone's GPA dipped during that point, I wouldn't look harshly at that. I mean, the other things that I look for on a resume, I would personally rather see someone who had maybe a lower GPA, but who had been involved with team sports that lets me know that they're a good collaborator, they can pull together with others. Someone who's gone and done some really interesting work or internships or maybe some philanthropy that they've been involved with. I think there's a depth and a dimension to a person that comes across in a resume, far beyond just one specific data point. To Jenny's point, of having this one GPA. So I'm really looking more holistically. What is this entire person going to be able to bring to bear? How are they connected not only in what they do academically, but in their greater community?
Thank you for that follow-up. We're going to move now into social media. So we see some people have LinkedIn sites, some people are using lots of different ways to promote themselves as employers are wanting to know about a candidate. So Laura, would you mind letting us know what you think about social media? Is it important to get your first job, and what recommendations do you have for the Wolf Pack?
Yeah. So I think there's kind of two sides to it. I mean, when it comes to LinkedIn, I definitely think it's important to at least have one. Coming from a recruiting standpoint, I use LinkedIn constantly for recruiting. So I have a recruiter account, I'm that one that bugs you kind of sending messages, but it's a great way and an easy way for recruiters to do searches and reach out to people. So that's one asset to it. I'd say with LinkedIn, I would definitely keep it updated. I look at people's profiles because I just do phone interviews. So it's nice for me to put a face to the name. So definitely have a professional photo. I think that's incredibly important. And then I like to look at facts. I look at languages, your skills, recommendations. I personally do that. Some recruiters don't. So I don't think it's necessarily really important to have every detail of your life on there, because recruiters typically, I think 10 seconds is like the average that they're going to go through, especially if they're a really fast-paced recruiter. So I don't think it's important to keep everything on there, but I definitely would at least have a professional photo, your job descriptions, and any languages, because recruiters do filter by that. When it comes to other social media like Facebook and Instagram, I don't personally ever look at that. I do have the person who oversees our account management department always looks at people's Facebooks for some reason. He's the hiring manager in that department. So I think as a general rule, I would just keep your social media private. That way, if a hiring manager gets curious or a recruiter gets curious, they're not going to see something they don't like, because human bias, they might see something and be like, you know what, I don't think they're going to be a fit here. So I would just keep that privatized. But in terms of LinkedIn, I definitely encourage you all to keep that up to date. And I know Marcy gives you a lesson on that. So take all those tips she's given you and at least have a professional photo at the minimum.
Yeah, and I'll let some of our other panelists, if they would like to unmute, add to that, and have my teaching assistants pop in the chat the podcasts and YouTubes about LinkedIn. I know our last one, episode 91, was a great interview that touched on LinkedIn. Let's see, Bob.
I was going to say, I'll second the LinkedIn photo. That's actually my biggest pet peeve on LinkedIn. I do trainings around LinkedIn and profile building. And if I don't like seeing pictures of dogs and couples and things like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be a stodgy headshot per se. You could show your personality, but it has to, it has to be appropriate. And then also emphasizing the banner photo as well, because the banner photo can reflect a lot about you, whether it's an NC State banner photo or a cause you believe in, or just a really nice skyline picture or something like that. But yeah, LinkedIn, the profile photos are my biggest pet peeve.
Thanks. And Jenny, did you want to add something to that?
Yes, I'm going to tell y'all, if I could give you one piece of advice to take out of here, which I hope we give you a lot of advice, but it would be that you ensure your LinkedIn is updated and that you use it. You don't buy a car to sit it in the garage. LinkedIn is your car. It is going to take you places, and you're going to use this tool in very different ways, depending on what juncture you are in the interview process. Right now, you're putting your profile out there. You're starting to build your personal brand virtually, which is really important right now. And then if you get a job interview, you're going to use that LinkedIn to maybe research information about the firm as well as information about your interviewer. Once you have that job, if you have an internship, hopefully it's very nerve-wracking. I know your initial first kind of post, like putting yourself out there, but hopefully you will post and share what you've been working on and what you've been doing, because this is your living, breathing resume of your experience and skills. And after that job is over, hopefully you will have connected with people and you're networking with them and you're adding them as links. And you never know how those networks will lead to job opportunities in the future. My current role, I received through someone reaching out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm very glad I did. But keep your options open and always keep your network open. And I think you should try to leverage and use this tool as much as you can. And the more you interact with LinkedIn, the more LinkedIn rewards you. So the more that you're liking, commenting, posting, the more that your profile is moving up with the kind of the way that their algorithms work. So sorry to be long-winded, but that's just my best piece of advice for you.
Such a good piece of advice. And students, I'm really excited that you're asking questions. I'm going to go off script now to the Q&A because we really want this to be for you. You're the ones here live. I will also say, as Ginny was saying, comment on things, connect to people. If you connect to any of our panelists today, please do a personalized LinkedIn connection, not a generic, will you join my network? Because we get hundreds of those a day. I see my panelists nodding. You need to mention you were at this session, that you got up early. This is early for you, right? Noon on a Sunday, that you were here live in this session and that you would like to connect on LinkedIn. That's where you personalize the connection. And I'm going to have Grant type something into the Q&A chat just so that you can see some examples of that and how you actually personalize your connection versus doing generic. Okay, so let's look at this Q&A. So you all can upvote things, which is great. That means like multiple people want to know the answer to this question. So keep typing these in. So thank you, Emily, for asking. What are the things that stand out the most to hiring managers on resumes or applications that would make them look at you closer after the initial screening? Who wants to take that stab at that one to begin with?
I'll jump in really quickly. Organization. I can't tell you as a recruiter how much of a struggle it is if I see a resume and I can't quickly pick out things. I think I saw some report that an average recruiter looks at a resume for 6 seconds. I don't know if that's still accurate. And it's sad to think about. And I try and do my best to look at them for as long as possible. But when you're screening so many resumes, especially a large company, you have to do something to stand out. And an easy way to do that is just make it easy to read. You don't have to do something fancy like put in colors or, make it some big graphic design. And if you can, great, because you definitely will stand out. But just the little things like having your name up at the front, having your education, some bullet points of skills, just keep everything in the same format. That way your recruiter can easily find things to navigate and they don't have to sit there and search for everything. So that's just something everyone can easily do. You can find tons of templates online. I know Marcy provides them to you. Just making it easy to read, I think, is the best thing to keep in mind.
Yes, and if my teaching assistant could put a link to our career guide in the chat, that will give you example templates, but we want you to customize it. Bob, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, in this day and age, I'll date myself here and say back when I was applying the jobs, when I got out of college, we had one resume and we mailed them, right? We didn't even use the internet. That's embarrassing. But in this day and age, you should be tailoring your resume to each position that you apply, because I see very often resumes that apply to positions and they don't align well with the position. And then in some cases, someone might reach out and say their friend applied and we go look at it, give it another look. And then you talk to the person and realize they have all of the qualifications for the role, but none of them are on the resume, which is doing yourself a disservice, because without that, inside track to make us go take a second look, you wouldn't have been viewed by a hiring manager. So when you're applying to a job, look at the job description, look at the qualifications, and make sure you have that on your resume, and preferably have the most important information to the top, right? So it's good to have jobs while you're going to school, but your jobs in school shouldn't be above the qualifications portion of your resume that make you a viable candidate.
That's an excellent point, Bob. Thank you so much. And Darlene, did you want to add to that?
Just being more specific probably to what Laura and Bob have already mentioned, when I've trained my staffing teams in the past, I think it's just important to have the perspective that that recruitment team, that talent acquisition team, is a gateway for someone else to look at your resume. And they often don't have the same background that you have. So if you're applying to a technical role, if it's IT, if it's something in a lab, if it's engineering, et cetera, it's likely the hiring manager has told our staffing team words to go look for: a specific software, a specific piece of equipment that they've used, a specific technique in a lab environment, et cetera. So in particular, if it's a technical role, you want to use the same words that the employer has published in that job description online, because that may be the only connection that recruiter has to understanding that you have that skill set. They may not know acronyms. They may not know other versions of the same technique. They've been given very specific instructions. And so that's always really helpful too, just to make sure you make it to that first gateway.
Excellent. Yes, Jenny.
To say, definitely include projects that you've done in school that may align to the work that you're hoping to do. You don't always have to be paid for work that's on your resume. So school projects that align could be a good fit. And also, it's okay if you're a server at a restaurant or you have a job that currently doesn't align to the one that you're hoping to get. You're still going to learn extremely valuable skills, customer service, being on time, professionalism, dealing with difficult scenarios. So it's okay to include those types of current jobs that you may have and think about how you could use those when you're parlaying your resume into an interview. I think sometimes people remove roles that they're actually working at because they don't think, oh, it's not IT and I want an IT job, so those don't fit. I just wanted to throw that out there, but absolutely own everything that's on the resume. So don't list a bunch of skills that you may not have just because you're hoping for the resume to be seen, because whatever is on your resume is fair game to be asked in the interview. So you do want to make sure you feel comfortable and confident with what you've listed.
Catherine, what do you want to say?
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to add leadership skills. That's one thing that will help you from anyone else stand out. And we look for that. I've talked to students so many times and they'll say, yeah, I'm a member of NSBE and I'm actually been the president for 2 years. I've been the treasurer. And I'm like, oh gosh, it's not on your resume. That's amazing. You're the largest chapter in the nation. You really should probably put that on your resume. That's great. So just wanted to add to make sure leadership, if you've held any type of role in a student org, anything like that, make sure that that's listed too.
100%, Catherine. And students, just remember, there are 8 career competencies that all employers are seeking. Leadership is one of those. Grant or Sari will put in the chat a YouTube so that if you need to learn the other 7 and you aren't sure of what the career competencies are, you can go back to that YouTube. All right, next up. So we are not going to ask really specific questions about coding in interviews, but save that for the engineering panel. That's coming up at 2. But we do have a question about how do panel companies look at OPT, international student applicants?
I can share what we do. It's hard for us because we're a government contractor. So we have to have someone that's a US citizen or green card holder or a refugee. So it makes it really hard for us if anyone's going to need sponsorship in the future, even if it's for internships too. So if you can, work currently, but you would need a sponsorship in the future, it's still hard for us because that's our pipeline. So we're bringing the interns in to learn the skill set to bring them on for full time. So it makes it really hard for us to be able to do any type of sponsorship.
Bob?
Yeah, we're able, I'd say about 90% of our jobs, we're able to bring in international students. It's not to say that the manager has the budget. In my groups, because I'm working with the laboratory sciences primarily, we do a lot of hiring and support visas, but there is a small percentage of groups within RTI that due to particular government contracts, we just aren't able to do that, where we have to have a US citizen, defense contracts and things like that.
And a great resource, Wolfpack fans, is called Going Global. And we'll pop a link in the chat to EPAC. If you click on the link Going Global, which is a vendor that we have purchased, it shows you all of the international friendly companies that would be open to students that may have a different visa. So that will be coming in the chat to you. I see some people are raising their hand. I'm not sure what that means, but what I want to say is type your question in the Q&A. That would be better than raising your hand. All right, next question up that got a lot of upvotes from Mina is, ooh, I love this one. Yeah, Courtney, I like that you're saying you want us to answer this. This is great. So thank you, Mina. What are some common mistakes made during interviews? And before you jump in, we're going to pop some YouTube tutorials on interviewing, as well as some podcast links on interviewing. So who wants to start off with mistakes?
I can do that, Marcy. I think probably the biggest mistake I see is someone coming into an interview and not being prepared at all for the types of questions that they want to ask, for the individuals that they're going to be meeting with, or the responsibilities that they're going to have. So, when I see someone face to face, I want them to come in with a couple of things. I want there to be, a spark and an interest in our organization. I want them to have reviewed our website. They should know who some of the key people they're going to be meeting with are. They should have looked over the job posting and be prepared to talk about the skills that they have that are a perfect match for the position, but also be very transparent about the areas that they still need to learn and develop in. A lot of times we post requirements for positions and then we have nice to haves as well. And an applicant doesn't necessarily have to have all the nice to haves. They just need to have the desire to want to master those areas and for that to come through during the interview process. So again, making sure you have great questions for the panel, making sure you've done your research and your homework before you come in, and that you're just well prepared for the experience, I think is the best thing that you can do.
I was going to jump on that really quick. I definitely agree with that. Especially getting on a phone interview and people have no idea what your company does. That's a, big no-no. I think one thing that I've noticed being a recruiter and when I used to interview is just be yourself. I think that's something to remember and know the corporate values of the company, corporate values and their mission statement. That's what companies go off of to make big decisions. So if you don't line up with that and you're talking to the recruiter and you're realizing, I'm not really this way, that's probably a big indication. And then if you're trying to be a certain way that you're not, then you're not going to be a fit for that company. If you're thinking, oh, I want more work-life balance, or I want, some sort of wellness perk, or, I want to do this, and that company is just not lining up, pretending you're going to enjoy that isn't going to do any good for you or for them. And recruiters can tell very easily too, when you're not being yourself, especially if it's in person. So I would just keep in mind, to be true to what you're looking for and make sure that you ask those questions too, to make sure that you're going to fit in with that company.
Yeah. And I was going to say too, don't be scared to say, I didn't understand that question, but in a nice way. Can you rephrase that? Or can you say that one more time? A lot of times I get students that get kind of uncomfortable and they're very nervous and they just fight through it. And they're completely off what they're trying to say. And they had a really good example and they could have formatted it really well. So sometimes the interviewers aren't natural interviewers, especially virtually. So sometimes just ask them to rephrase it. They don't know to say, would you like for me to rephrase that for you? They aren't in HR. So don't be scared to do that, or ask for clarification, or ask for a minute if you're taking down notes. All of those are great things. Things I don't really like that I hear is, can we circle back to that one? No, we can't circle back to that one. But if you'd like for me to rephrase it, we can rephrase that one if that's the issue. So there's just ways you can say it, and then that it sounds really professional and that you're still interested and trying to work through it.
I think just to elaborate on what Catherine said too, you can also ask if you've answered their question, right? So they may not have asked the question in a way that you gave them the type of scenario they were looking for. I do that in my everyday life anyway. Did I answer your question? Did I cover what you were thinking, you were trying to get at? It's perfectly fine to ask.
That's really great. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I would just recommend that you practice out loud. Best place to practice, in front of the mirror in your bathroom. Laugh if you will, but I think students practice in their head. It sounds very different in your head than it does saying it out loud. And since it's very uncomfortable to interview anyway, because you don't know what someone's going to ask you, it's kind of good for you to say it out loud and hear how you may want to respond, how it might sound. Looking up interview questions you could get and just like practicing with another person or practicing them out loud. You wouldn't go to the Super Bowl without having done practice. If you're trying to land a job that you're really hoping is going to be your career, you're going to hope that you would do some practice before that. And I find that oftentimes I've had students say, oh, well, this is just the first interview I've ever done. And it makes me feel like they demonstrate sometimes during it that they weren't necessarily prepared for that first interview. So you want to be able to come in with confidence. You should definitely practice.
And we offer practice mock interviews through EPAC. So we'll pop that link in the chat again for anyone that got here late. If you log into EPAC, you can schedule a mock interview with your career coach. Many of our career coaches are going to be moderating panels this afternoon. They are assigned to your college. So if you're in business, you have, Janet Rakes. If you are in the College of Sciences, you have Wes Wade. If you are in humanities, you have Sarah Wild. Every single college, Glenda Darrell for engineering, and they're here to practice, like Jenny said. Like, you just pop in a time, you make an appointment, and you get feedback. And because so many interviews are virtual now, it's really, really great to practice it. We had another good question pop in the Q&A I wanted to ask, which was from Ryan. Thank you so much for this question. And I will tell you, we do have a podcast answering this, and it's episode 5. So I'm going to ask my my support team here to pop in episode 5 link. But I want to see what this panel says too. What are some of the best questions to ask interviewers to really stand out? Okay, so this is what the candidate would ask. What are your thoughts on asking questions if they have any doubt about them to try to address it? Let me say that again. What are your thoughts on asking the interviewer if they have any doubts about them? Oh, about you as a candidate. Like, do you doubt that I'm qualified for this job? Or what am I lacking for this job? Ooh, great question, Ryan.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I worked at a company once where we hired 300 salespeople over the course of probably about 2 months. And every single salesperson at the end of their interview would always ask, do you have any questions? Are there anything that I can go back and clarify for you? And they would close a little harder. They would actually say, are you comfortable recommending me for this position? Because they were really, in sales, they needed to show that they could close and get themselves to the next level. So I don't know that you necessarily want to be that forthcoming or that not aggressive, but close that hard maybe during a typical interview. But I always think it's wise to say, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate the opportunity to learn more about the organization. Is there anything else I can clarify for you about my background? And I think it's a really nice way to tie things out.
Yeah, or I think, sorry, Bob, if I cut you off.
No.
I was going to say, Sarah, I totally agree with that. And then another way you could phrase it is maybe like, what would make this candidate successful? And then that's giving your recruiter a way to give you, their ideal candidate, and also being able to compare it to yourself. So maybe you might put the recruiter on the spot a little bit, saying like, am I a good fit? Because some recruiters are gonna be like, oh yeah, but then, you're not. So hopefully they give you honest feedback, but another way you could phrase that is just what makes this candidate successful. And then you can yourself kind of go through that evaluation. So just another suggestion of how you could phrase that same question.
Yeah, and a similar answer, and I actually had this question asked of me this week, and the candidate asked, if I was to get this job, and we had this conversation a year later, how would success be defined? I told him to ask the hiring manager, but I didn't have that answer, right? So he did actually, and he brought that up in his interview, and the hiring manager absolutely loved the question. So I thought it was a fantastic answer, and I couldn't believe it's the first time a candidate asked that.
That is my favorite question. Marcy's probably heard me say this like 10 times over so many years. We had someone come in who was an NC State engineering student who had actually interned with us, but then was interviewing for a full-time position at the end of the internship. And she stepped back, and the only thing she had ever done was the internship, other than some leadership courses. And I'm confident she was engaged with a variety of leadership activities on campus. And she said, how will you measure performance and my success in this job? And I stepped back and I thought, most experienced candidates don't ask me that question, but here's a student who has no experience going through a performance appraisal, but has enough leadership qualities in her that she wants to understand how to be successful in her career. And it's stuck with me. It's probably been over a decade at this point, but that is absolutely one of my favorite experiences I've had.
That's why I liked it as well, because this was a May grad. This was someone that hasn't even graduated yet. And I was just like, I was blown away because it was smart. It was a good question.
What a great way to stand out. And something Sarah said earlier about just like really knowing your company. I can't emphasize that enough. And our DHL library friends, I'm going to have Grant pop in some links to how you actually dig into places like Business Source Complete, which it's not just what Metlife wants you to know about their company and what they put on their website. Because of course, Jenny, they're going to say they're amazing, right? But it's what everybody else is saying. You can do a SWOT analysis on a company, know their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and you are going to blow away your interviewer if you use these resources, and our library pays for them. So Grant, if you can type in some more about that. And Sarah, did you want to add on that?
I think it's so important, Marcy, like you said, to do the research on the companies and not only on the specifics, the revenue or, budgets, things like that, but also, the cultural aspect of the company. One of the things that's changed so dramatically, being virtual now and not actually walking into a physical location is that we don't get that kind of sense of the energy. We don't see people interacting kind of casually because we're not having the opportunity to go into buildings or offices. So for me, interviewing and interviewing others, it's really important to see, if I meet with 4 different people and they all are giving me a consistent message about the values of the company and the work style and what to expect, or does someone have, does everyone have kind of a different answer for that? Because to me, the more consistent messaging you hear, the more aligned the organization is and the more agreement there is about the core values and how we operate together as a team and what behaviors we're going to embody collectively. So just encouraging, I guess, students to push into the culture more as they go through and they interview and interact with these different people.
Excellent. These are such good questions. Students, wow, you're on fire today on this afternoon. And I know that my colleagues, Courtney and Lori, who are experts who work right here in the Career Development Center, are answering a lot of these questions, just typing in answers to you. And then you're upvoting some great questions. The next one's from Allison. And Allison wrote, how do I communicate during an interview that I know about who I am speaking with? What if I know about some of the people, but not others?
Like know about the hiring manager?
Right. I think maybe they have some connections in the company and they would like to communicate that they have some direct connection with that organization. Maybe they know a couple people on the staff or someone that works there.
Oh, I think always flaunt your connections. I mean, in a professional manner though, I mean, don't, say your personal relationship maybe, but any connection you have with the company is a great gateway and you should definitely use it. Because referrals go a really long way. I mean, recruiters love that too. The easier you make their job, the better. So if you know someone and they can give you a great recommendation, or if you chatted with someone through LinkedIn, like any small connection you make can help. You just have to go about it the right way. So, not maybe throwing in like personal details, but you could say, hey, I met this person here, or they're my aunt, or whatever it is. But I think knowing connections is a great way to get into a company and a good leeway into an interview as well, because it kind of eases the conversation. You might say, hey, Laura, I know you went to NC State too, go Wolfpack. Like that's a nice thing to kind of start the discussion. Or if you know something about their coworker, anything like that can kind of make that recruiter feel more of a personal connection with you.
Very good. Next question from Liz. What corporate language should we stay away from? You referenced to not say, can we circle back to that? Ooh, good question, Liz. So are there kind of like buzzwords that you want to stay away from? I want to help people. I'm just wondering. You've heard it all, my hiring manager friends.
Don't say low-hanging fruit.
Do
No.
not say low-hanging fruit. Oh, okay.
I'm joking. That's sarcasm, but yeah, it's one you hear so often. So.
I think my nails on the chalkboard statement is when someone comes in and they haven't had their first position yet. They really haven't had a chance to kind of break into industry yet, and they walk in and say, like, I really want to manage people. And I just think that's great, but let's start building that foundation first. So I think just an awareness of kind of where we are in our career path right now, and kind of honesty about that is helpful, versus just saying like, or I want to be the CEO, and I'm like, that's great, but that's not going to happen the next 2 to 3 years. So yeah, those are my nail and chalkboard ones.
Okay, very nice, very nice. All right, I'm going to get back to a pre-question that was asked. This has to do with visible tattoos. So what is the deal with that right now? Does having a visible tattoo, multiple piercings, really interestingly colored hair have any impact at this stage on the hiring process? I see Laura smiling so big on that. Do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of depends on the position. You know, some companies have a very business professional culture, and that's something you can tell from a website or tell from anyone at the company. Like if you look them up, you should be able to kind of gather that information. But I think as a rule of thumb, generally I'd say probably doesn't matter too much. I mean, I don't know if my other recruiters here have a different opinion. For my company, we're very business casual, so I could care less, you know, what you look like. Our hiring managers are trained to be non-biased as possible, so I do not care what your appearance is. All I care is if you can do the job. It doesn't matter, you know, what you're wearing, what your hair color is, what your tattoos are, etc. But that could be different for another company. You know, if they're more business professional, maybe like a lawyer firm or an engineering company. So I think just know your audience. But as a rule of thumb, I wouldn't worry about it too much. As long as you just, you know, look like somewhat good. I wouldn't put too much emphasis on it.
Yeah, speaking from experience, I have very visible tattoos, but visible is defined by what you're wearing, right? So I've been in my role for more than 17 years, so nobody cares. But if I was to go interview at a new company, they wouldn't be visible tattoos. They would be covered by sleeves, right? And they would never show until I felt comfortable with that organization. So it almost sounds hypocritical, but I would say don't show them, until you're in the culture and you know how they're going to be viewed. But that's how I approach it, having them. So,
Yeah, I agree with I don't mind it at all. My sister's covered from head to toe. And I even tell her, I'm like, please just cover them up, because of what Laura was saying earlier is everyone has that unconscious bias. No matter how much training we receive and how much we're trying to work on ourselves, you don't know who's interviewing you, and that they might just have an unconscious bias against it. And the more of those that you keep out of your interview, the better. So if you're covered, it's not even a thing. But I don't think it will go against you either. But it's just better safe than sorry is what I try to tell her.
I think it can go against you with the wrong person. It depends on the company. Yeah, better safe than sorry. And like I said, partially hypocritical, but it's a fact. And so
I agree with you though, Bob. I do think it could go poorly for a candidate coming into a position. But I think if I was a candidate coming in with visible tattoos, or I've always wanted to have purple hair. I've never had it, but if I was wanting to work in an environment that was cool with me having purple hair, I would want to know that walking into the interview. So I would encourage people not to hide who they are or cover things up, and interview with kind of present one way during the interview and then show up for the first day of work completely flipped, because we want to be candid with who we are. We want, I want to hire somebody who's comfortable in their identity, in our culture, and in our environment. So I wouldn't suppress anything on the interview, because if it's not going to work there, it's not going to work long term at the company either.
Very good. All right, one last word on this, Darlene. You look like you were unmuted.
Yeah, so I completely agree with everything everyone said, right? I think you never know who is perceiving you how, right? And so it's a statement you're making. If you don't care and you want them to be comfortable with your purple hair, then you need to wear your purple hair. I was just thinking, everyone was talking though, it's about distractions, right? For me. And so you're welcome, Jenny. I don't care if it's your purple hair, your tattoo, the earrings you chose to wear, the perfume or cologne you had on, or wrinkles in your shirt. You don't want people distracted by whatever is going on with you. You want them focused on what you're saying and what you have to offer. So to the extent you can limit the distractions, which is easier when we interview virtually, right? So you guys don't know that I have on crazy pink socks, right? But I wouldn't wear them into my interview because I don't want you looking at my pink socks. So I just think that's probably where my focus would be. And my advice that I would give is whatever it is you're bringing in for that virtual or that in-person interview, you just want to make sure, and that's why we always say, you err on the side of wearing things that are kind of subtle and simple and this, that, and the other. You don't wear your perfume and you don't do your crazy hair that day, just because you want them focused on what you can deliver.
Ooh, winner, winner, chicken dinner. So Courtney, you did a great interview on this for the podcast with one of our graduate students, if you can pop that in the chat too. And gosh, this time has flown. We need to give everybody a chance to do a quick bio break before they go to their next session. So I'm gonna ask one last question. And again, students, you can be popping in and out of these sessions. So be thinking about what you wanna go to at 1 o'clock. And Grant, again, will put in the link to where all of the concurrent sessions are listed, either strengths or finding your internship or job. So also, Jenny, you popped something in the chat, which was great. It showed like some things that you were hiring for. If any of our other recruiters would like to pop something in the chat, you have the ability to chat and students can see your chat. Anything like a web link to your company, something, about where you do your hiring, that would be awesome if you could type that in the chat so our students would know how to follow up after this session if they wanted to apply to your organization. So I'll just, I'll let everybody kind of take a minute to type that in for RTI and for Eaton and all of our companies. So this last question. Okay, I love this one. And thank you, Lori, for upvoting this. How do you reply to what are your salary expectations?
I can start with that. Yeah, so I'm really glad you brought this up. So I think you should look at the job market first off. You can find a lot of information on Glassdoor, Indeed. I mean, there's probably 15 different websites out there. Know your market. You don't want to go in too low and you don't want to go in too high, or else your recruiter's going to be like, what are you looking at to get this information? So I would say know the market first and foremost, and also don't sell yourself short. Just because you might not have a really fancy internship, or you might not have 3 years of work experience, you are coming from a top university and you have a lot to add. So I would say I would go a little bit higher, honestly, than what you are looking for. And I would negotiate for sure. I can't tell you how many times I have approval from my company to offer a salary range starting from here to here. And, we offer one and the person accepts it, but there is a little bit of wiggle room for them to negotiate. And it bums me out coming from a recruiter standpoint, because I want to give people as much as possible, but if you don't ask, you never know. And your recruiter is not going to retract an offer just because you ask for a higher salary. If anything, it shows that you're competitive and you want to get what you feel that you are worth. So I would say know your market, value yourself, and definitely negotiate once you get an offer.
Did she summarize that perfectly? Nothing to add? Okay, lovely. Well, Wolfpack fans, this hour has flown by. Thank you all so much for spending part of your Sunday with us. We know there are many things you could be doing today. I'm going to ask Courtney to hang out just a couple more minutes if students have any final questions they want to email in, because Sari, Grant, again, thank you all for helping. They're going to head to the next session that goes at 1. Again, you can either go to the Finding Your Internship, Succeeding in Your First Job session, or you can go to one of the sessions on using your top 5 strengths. That will be from 1 until 2. And then you can piece out of there and head on over to the career specific panel where you can get those questions answered about coding in the interview that are really tailored to the actual type of jobs that you're seeking. Thank you, friends, for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Peace, everyone.
Thank you.
Good luck, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. Happy Sunday.
Bye.